Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to be here with you today. And I came from the place where I live, which is Ottawa, Kansas. Has anybody here been to Ottawa, Kansas? Yeah, well, there's a few of you that have. And so we have a little bit of connection here. And I'm delighted that you have warmly welcomed me and let me come and do this thing which I'm doing, which is a sermon, partially, a testimony, partially, and a little bit of a foundation commercial. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can help contribute to generosity in your church. And I am a product of a generous church. I grew up in a church that, well, looked a lot different than this one. Southern Ohio, little white church, stained glass windows, bright inside, big windows, hard pews. Anybody ever grew up on hard pews? They were all oak. We didn't have any of these soft, cushiony chairs here in the church that I grew up in. It was a very different church, and the experience of worship was quite a bit different, for we had an organ and a piano, and my dad was, well, he would have laughed at being called a worship leader. He was a song leader, okay? So when the church service was just about to begin and Sunday school was over, he'd pick up a hymnal, and he would start thumbing through to find 2 songs to sing, and we sang that day, and that was worship. Well, that was a very different world than the world we have right now. But what we've learned is that this is a generous church, and that was a generous church, because generosity is a core value. Core values are things that stay the same even though the world changes and circumstances change and trends change and all those things that change through the years. We learned that oak pews weren't a core value. Can you say amen? Yeah. Neither were the organ and the rest of those things, but generosity is all the way through. And this church taught me generosity. This is the church that ushered me into God's kingdom and molded me and shaped me with a set of values that were like Jesus Christ. And I really appreciate that. I was saved in that church, little church. We had a revival. On Thursday night, we had the Singing West family, a quartet. They played guitars and sang, a mother and dad, son and daughter, and none of them knew who was going to preach until the music was happening, and then one of them would sense the anointing of the Spirit, and that's the person who had preached. And this night it was Edna West, and she was preaching. I have no idea what she said, but I knew God was working on me in my heart. So I went down to the altar, and I was the only one. I'd never done that before. And the Christians gathered around me, began to pray. Mrs. Henson gathered around me. She was a little old lady with a bun in her hair and long sleeves and a long dress, just setting the atmosphere for you. That's the circumstances under which I was praying for salvation. I actually learned after seeing her obituary one day that she was 47 years old when she was the little old lady that was praying with me at the altar. So perspective can change through life. But she was praying with me, and after the altar, she said, "Mark, I have a question. Do you believe that the Lord has forgiven you of your sins?" And I very confidently responded, "No, I don't." So if you know anything about little country churches and, holiness churches and prayer, you know exactly what happened next. Back to the altar, back to prayer. We prayed harder, we prayed longer, and we beat all the sin you can beat out of a little 8-year-old boy. But when I got that question the next time, I knew that my life was different because something happened in my heart. And I experienced the work of the Lord for the first time. And I was able to wear this new title called Christian. I was saved, and that made a difference in my life. A lot of tough things happened. There was a lot of times I needed forgiveness from that point on, and a lot of times I'm sure I disappointed my parents and the Lord, but I felt called to preach. And this church, you talk about a generous church, they used to let me preach when I was 15 years old. You have to be a really generous church to listen to a 15-year-old preach, let me tell you. But they gave and built and worked with me through those years, and I really appreciate the fact that Christians before me gave so that there could be a church for me to mature in and become like Jesus. And so I thank you all for being the kind of church that gives and gives and gives so that people and little 8-year-old boys can come to know Jesus and build them into Christ-like disciples. So I work at the Church of the Nazarene Foundation, which is housed in the Global Ministry Center of the church. This is our denomination. We have about 4,800 churches in the United States and about 28,000 churches across the world. And that's because we have We have given to missions, more churches outside the United States than inside. And this church, the Crossbridge Community Church, has been a part of the team for, I guess, 99 years, right? You're about to have your 100th birthday. You've been a part of what I would call Team Nazarene, and you have been generous through those years. One of the benefits of working at headquarters is I get to look at numbers, and I really enjoy numbers, so I did. I looked at the numbers and discovered that you do have records of being a church in 1925, and on your first pastor's report, which came in 1926, then you passed the plate for that first year of your life, and the offerings totaled for the year $848. How about that? That's what you did, 1925. But the record also shows that in your first year of existence, you also gave 308 of those dollars to global missions, what we would have called the World Evangelism Fund or the general budget through those days. So you, from your very first year, started out with generosity, and you've given to missions every year. Now, our records actually show that you missed 1928. I don't know what was going wrong. I'm here to talk to you about dropping the ball. No, not really. My guess would be that you were actually very generous to missionaries through 1928, and that the deficit there was on the part of the record keeping at headquarters. That's a whole lot more likely. But you've given every year consistently to the World Evangelism Fund. If you take all of those offerings from 1926 to now, 1925 to now, and add them up, you have given $1,895,442 to missions from this local church. That's just pretty cool. Well, through those years, you also gave just about $600,000 to mission specials. Now, all of this doesn't include what you're doing in your community and homeless people and compassionate ministry centers and the mission you do there. This is just what you've done on the denominational level as a people who are concerned about people, even if they're very far away, knowing Jesus and being loved in his name. Well, you're probably thinking in 1930, 1940, 1950, all these dollars, they're not the same as today's dollar. It doesn't mean the same thing. So I had the research people adjust all of those dollars for annual inflation, and they came up with this number. In today's dollars, this church has given $5,056,785. Yeah, that's worth some applause. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you. You have been mission-oriented, and you have demonstrated generosity. That's the kind of church you are. Well, we're talking about this core value of generosity, and what makes a church generous? Well, I think what we can do is we can look at the church and see what generous churches are like, and I believe you demonstrate those. The first one is that generous churches that are generous to the core, recognize that God owns everything. That's not a light verse. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, says Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and all who live in it, they belong to God. You see, the world out there doesn't get that God's in charge and that he really is the owner of everything. But when you're a generous church, you develop a culture that understands it all belongs to God. The Bible says that the Lord owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He also owns the 1,000 hills under the cattle. He also, if you climbed up on the tallest hill and looked around, he owns everything you can see from the top of there, even if you look up to the sky and all that there is. And we, as Christians, as followers of this Lord who has worked so wonderfully throughout history, all the way from Adam and Eve, through Jesus and through our lives, this God that we serve provides us stuff, and all the stuff is his. We are stewards of it for a period of time. So the things that we enjoy most, our house, the money that we have, and the things that we have, these are ours because of God's generosity, because he allows us to be steward of them. And what's really important is that we recognize in a culture that is really tight on ownership and pulling our things in and holding them close to ourselves, that the stuff that we have has been given to us so that we can reflect our God, the generosity of our God with them. Ultimately, we're citizens of heaven. Generous churches believe not only that God owns everything, but that the Lord's never going to run out of anything because he's able to. He's the producer. He is the provider. God is our provision. He gives us stuff. God is able to bless you abundantly so that in all things, at all times, having all you need, you will abound in every good work, says 2 Corinthians 9:8. So this is not about a prosperity gospel. If you give some, you get more back, but it really does work that way. You give to the Lord, you can't outgive the Lord. It's just the way it works. He's never going to run out of anything. And so we put our faith and trust in him. And this might sound a little backwards to the world. If God does own everything, then why would we as Christians give things to his church and give things to his Lord and give gifts like this? Well, we would do this because our giving is a reflection of his giving. It helps us to line up with the Lord's principles. It helps us to keep us from going down a rabbit trail called selfishness. That's what giving does for us. Giving has very little to do with the amount of money or the thing that it is. Giving has everything to do with the heart and the attitude and lining up with God, being on the same team with the Lord so that we are thinking like he's thinking, so that we're becoming like him, that we are becoming Christ-like disciples. And so if we're going to make Christ-like disciples in a generous church, that's going to have to be one of the pillars of discipleship, right along with worship and Bible reading and all of the things that we teach people to do in order to be more like Jesus, is teaching people to think of possessions like Jesus does. There is no scarcity in God's kingdom. He is the Lord who provides. In order for all this to happen, we're going to have to be a kind of people who live counter-culturally, because our culture does not have the core value of generosity. The culture very often has a culture or a core value of selfishness. And you can certainly see that if you just look around the world and see how the world behaves and see how the world uses their assets and the things that happen and do. Just look simply at advertising, because advertisers have a goal in mind, and that is that our dollars become their dollars. And there's a lot of teaching out there in the world on how to be selfish. It's just everywhere. We don't really need that teaching. We need a church that will live differently and be opposed to all the ways that the world is behaving and doing things. So we're going to have to be the example of the ones who take responsibility for assets, use them wisely, and teach people to use assets wisely. It's a weird world where we are as wealthy as we are in the United States. Baby boomers are massively wealthy, the wealthiest people that have ever existed on the face of the earth. They tell us that if you slept under a roof last night, got to this church in a car, and are not worried about starving to death before the end of May, then you are among some of the wealthier people that have ever lived, and some of the people, and wealthier than most people that are even living on the face of the earth right now. God has just blessed us and blessed us and blessed us. Yet we live in this crazy world where with all of this stuff, we have people that can't pay their bills and are struggling and worrying about debt and worrying about issues. If anybody is going to help fix this messed up world, it's going to be churches that are generous like this one, that can help lead people into discipleship, into a good stewardship mindset to live differently than the world lives. Generous churches are continually touching the poor and the needy. It doesn't necessarily come natural to us to look across and around the room and with people and everywhere we are at work and in our social gatherings and think, who's out there that just really has a need that perhaps I could reach or that this church could reach? The Bible tells us in Matthew 25, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these, my brothers, you've done it for me. Generous churches are never satisfied with messed up lives. Generous churches are involved in helping to fix the messed up lives that are around us. And it kind of takes an attitude of keeping your antennas out for whoever's out there and what's happening. My wife retired from a job that had a very generous boss who was involved in lots of ministries for compassion and so forth. And one of the ways that he taught his employees compassion was to occasionally walk into the office. Let's say there was a staff meeting at 2 o'clock. before lunch, he'd give every employee $100 and say, you're not allowed to come to staff meeting until you've taken this $100 and done something with it to bless somebody that's in need. Now, you might first think, well, that would be a real privilege. I could do that today, take $100 out there. But it really wasn't as easy for them as you might imagine, because you have to kind of think, looking around, who is this person? Where am I going to go? Am I going to go to the grocery store? Am I going to go to a restaurant? How am I going to connect with somebody? And then at the same time, listen for the Lord to point somebody out that has a need that I could give 10 people $10 or one person $100. And do I do this anonymously? Do I leave it at the counter, or do I talk to the individual? What am I going to do with this thing in order to follow God's lead? That's a spiritual perception that needs some practice sometimes. But generous churches are always on the lookout for messed up lives that they might be able to help fix. And then generous churches touch the poor and needy. I just said that, didn't I? Touch the poor and needy. First mistake in this sermon, right there it was. Generous churches encourage end-of-life stewardship. This is really my expertise. The Church of the Nazarene Foundation, our specific ministry is to help people be good stewards of their life assets. So we wind up working with people on wills and trusts and various kinds of gifts, even if they're current gifts, that are a little more complicated. I often say that we're an organization that helps you make the kind of gift that doesn't fit in the offering plate. Because you don't often get a deed or a charitable trust or a gift annuity or a piece of jewelry or a collection of artwork in the offering plate, but we can help with all those kind of things. But I would like for us to think in terms of what's going to happen with the accumulated assets that we wind up with before we go to heaven. And are we thinking about how to be a good steward of those things? I don't want you to misunderstand anything I'm saying, that I am not here to swindle you out of the family farm. In fact, we encourage people to give as much money as possible to their children. The Bible actually tells us in Proverbs 13, verse 22, that a righteous man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So that's a very good thing. Part of our goals are to help you bless your family as much as possible. We'd also like for you to consider blessing your church as much as possible. And we'd like to help you bless the Internal Revenue Service as little as possible when you go to heaven. Because there are some things to do where you actually pay less tax and more goes to the church and to the family. So we'd love to help you put those things together and make that happen. In this rich world that we live in, where God has blessed us so much, you would think if you looked across history, you'd say, oh, those people, they've really been blessed. They're going to be the best stewards of their life assets. They're going to be the best stewards of their estates. And what we know about the United States is that most people, about 60%, live their lives procrastinating on getting a will or a revocable trust in place, a set of instructions for what to do with my money when I go to heaven. Or, of course, I'm talking about the other people, certainly not the people in the room here today, but just in case there's somebody that slipped in that doesn't have their estate plan put together, we're encouraging you to find yourself an in-state lawyer and get that thing done. And while you're deciding who you're going to give your money to, perhaps consider giving a little bit to the Crossbridge Community Church of the Nazarene. We'd be glad to help you and your attorney with that language. We also have a plan, because I know from having done this for several years that I can motivate people just a little bit to get their will done, and it can go away pretty quick. So we have a plan for those of you who have not and probably aren't ever going to go to an attorney. I have some cards out back, has a QR code on one side and the foundation logo on this side along with a website. But you can go to our website and you can log in. It will take you, create an account and log in, and it will take you to a tool that more than 4,000 people use every week to create their own will. First choice, go to an attorney. But if you're not willing to do that, this works pretty well as long as your estate isn't too complicated. So if you're a gazillionaire and own property in 4 states, let's go to an attorney. But if you're fairly normal in life, this is not a bad tool. It's certainly better than nothing, because you have, while you're alive, the opportunity to make a decision. Who's going to get this stuff that God has given me? Where's it going to go? And you have the opportunity to give some to your church. If you don't do this before you go to heaven, then you die in what's called an intestate situation. And that means that you have transferred your privilege to decide who raises your children and who gets your money to a probate court judge. And what I can promise you, they'll follow some instructions and figure out who's related to who and get it to a bunch of family. But I can promise you that there is no probate court judge in the state of Illinois that's going to sit on the other side of the bench and say, oh, I think this person would have wanted something to go to the Crossbridge Community Church of the Nazarene. That's just not going to happen. If you want to bless this church with part of your estate, you're going to have to make those preparations in writing, all notarized, while you are still living. That's my encouragement. Do this thing. So I want to tell you a couple of stories about some people that I run across in this whole realm of generosity and some of the cool things they've done. Some people have endowments in their mind, and we do have endowments for local churches and for various ministries, quite a few of them actually. We can help you establish from your estate an endowment that will do something significant for this church. The purpose of an endowment is that the money goes in and gets invested, and that the church gets money next year and 10 years from now and 50 years from now and 100 years from now in order to do ministry with it. This was just a really cool one that happened. A small church in the Midwest where the church was just being the church. This Nazarene church was doing what it was supposed to do. A young woman with children, recently divorced, wandered into the church, and she had needs. She just needed loved. And so this local church just loved her. Well, none of the family had any Nazarene roots, and there are some denominations that make a big deal and talk about endowments all the time. And Grandma in this situation was from a denomination where they were very familiar with endowments. So she calls the Nazarene pastor and says, I would like to contribute to your endowment. The pastor said, oh, we don't have an endowment. And so he called the Nazarene Foundation. We began to work with her. And she said she would love to help start the church's endowment. So we all got together, children in the room, Grandma in the room, the pastor and the foundation was there, and Grandma said, I would like to donate $250,000 to help start an endowment for your church. And so when that happens, we like to work with the whole family, but you always wonder just a little bit what the kids are thinking when $250,000 just leaves their estate, and they might have been intending to handle that. So I'm watching all this play out, and apparently generosity was a core value, because her son spoke up and said, that's awesome, Mom. I'll match it with $250,000. So now we have a $500,000 endowment that blesses this local church. Every year they get around $25,000 from our foundation that has the designation for ministry to single moms and children. Isn't that cool? Now, we've been doing this for 20 years. We're only having our 20th birthday this year, but the foundation has grown enough and worked with enough people that we now have flowing through to Nazarene Ministries just over $1 million a month. We don't have enough of that going to Crossbridge, but it can happen out there. It takes a few years for these things to mature, but we're spitting out $1 million a month right now, and we'd love to help you and your church get together on those generous things. Let's talk about Chris and Sarah, the strong-willed parents. They're a young couple, college graduates, bought their first house, had their first child, and were thinking about their life and what would happen if the unimaginable thing happens where both of them were suddenly killed in an accident. What would happen? So they listened to a message like this, and they decided we need to be the ones who decide what's going to happen to our daughter. What's going to happen to our daughter if we are killed? Who's going to take her to church, and who's going to read the Bible to her and tuck her in at night? We want to be the ones to decide that. And they also decided that while they were planned on saving a lot for life, they weren't there yet. They bought an insurance policy that would provide money for their daughter to be raised, and also decided that the church, their local church, would be 10% beneficiary of that life insurance policy. That's a good thing to do. I hope your mind isn't going down the road where I'm about to say they were tragically killed in an accident, because they weren't. But there's still a lot of benefit. They're still raising their children and they're doing well. But the benefit is they know that if something happens, they're going to be okay. Their family is going to be well cared for. And I can tell you that if you packed in the back of your brain somewhere, in the back of your life, I know I need to get this done. I don't expect to die early, but I need to get this done. It feels really lightweight to have it finished and know that this aspect of life is taken care of. It's a good stewardship aspect, and I encourage you to do it. Gloria the Giver, she gives to like 20 different organizations every year and loves to give away, but she has most of her wealth in stocks, and it's really a hassle to give stock to 20 different organizations every year. And so she gives it to one organization, the Church of the Nazarene Foundation, and we put that into a fund called a donor advised fund, kind of like a charitable savings account. And so anytime the Lord plucks a string in her heart and says, you need to give some money to this organization or to this church, she just gets on and sends us an email, and we send the check right out to that organization. Donor advised funds are very popular these days, and be happy to talk to you about how one might be a good option for you. How about Mr. and Mrs. Tired of Paying Taxes? Now, I changed the names and places on my stories to protect the generous, but is Mr. and Mrs. Tired of Paying Taxes here? I'm pretty sure. So Mr. and Mrs. Tired of Paying Taxes are living their life, working hard, paying federal income tax, FICA tax, Medicare tax, state income tax, and decide that for their retirement, they're probably going to need a little more income, so they buy a quadplex and rent out to 4 different couples or 4 different families. So when they own the quadplex, they also have to pay real estate tax, of course, and then they make a little bit of money on it. So the income that they have off the rental, they pay all those taxes on that again as well. And when they have to buy a new house or a faucet or a piece of carpet or paint, they also pay sales tax on this. Now they're in their 70s, and they're kind of tired of collecting rent and fixing broken pipes. So they decide what we should do is take the equity out of that quadplex now. We should sell it. Of course, they bought it at this level. It's now worth this, and they depreciated it down some. So they're pretty excited about the fact that they've made a lot of money by owning this quadplex. The government's actually excited about this too. In fact, they congratulate them with something called capital gains tax. Now they get to pay tax when they sell the thing. Has anybody been down this road? Capital gains tax is one of the easiest things to get out of with charitable gifts. So they actually took that quadplex and donated it into a trust that we created and became trustee of, which is called a remainder trust. And so they gave it away, and we were able to sell it without any immediate capital gains tax whatsoever. Now there's a larger pile of money in there that pays them growth throughout the years of their life, and when they go to heaven, the entire amount of that quadplex, all that money, is going to go to their local church. So this is a good story. We are, I guess I would say we're experts on complicated gifts. If that fits you, please talk to us. Bob and his interest. Bob's 85 years old. When he goes down to the bank for a CD, he might be getting 5% now. Just a year ago, he'd have been getting about 0.5% on the interest in the bank. But if you have a lot of years of experience under your belt and you have some money, as Bob did, Bob actually had a similar amount of money coming out of his estate going to his local church. But when we explained to him, he could give that money now and receive a charitable deduction for the gift and also receive a higher interest rate, up to 9% in some cases, guaranteed for the rest of your life. He was pretty excited about that and made a wonderful gift. And then Stanley and his stuff. I have so many stories. I could talk till supper time of the fun things that we have been able to handle as gifts from people. We handle real estate every month. We handle agricultural products, sometimes up to $1 million worth of corn and soybeans, and have some cotton coming in this year that have been given. We've handled whole states, coin collections, gold bullion, an airplane, an excavator, some artwork that was pretty valuable. So if you're thinking of gifting something that is non-cash, we have a lot of ways to help you turn that into cash that will bless the Crossbridge Community Church of the Nazarene. All right, let me tell you that I'm going to be out in the foyer, and I have some brochures and these little cards that have got the QR codes on it for doing your will. And I will let you know that I am going to be in your town on Tuesday, and you may call this church tomorrow in order to set up a time. We'll have about a half hour for each family or individual that wants to come in and talk with me. And I'll be happy to talk to you specifically. I will give you my little disclaimer. I am not an attorney. I'm not a tax expert. I can help you give your money away. I'm a gift planner, okay? But we do move in this world, and we can find the solution for whatever you would like to do in order to live generously. Thank you so much.